It's -4 degrees Fahrenheit here in Minnesota. Let's go thrifting. So this was my first stop, and this is what I found, this mid-century end table. And it's nothing too spectacular, but it's got nice lines. It does need a lot of work, as you can see. The top is pretty scratched up, and the legs are really wobbly. They'll need to be re-glued, and you can see the wobble there. And here it is back at the shop, and you can get a closer look at the top. There's a lot of scratches. Some of them are going against the grain, like that big one there. And there's a small water ring there, that black ring. And the legs are completely loose and will need to be re-glued. And keep in mind that I'll be selling this table when I'm done, so I have to be careful about how many hours I put into it, because I know there's only a certain amount that I'll be able to sell this for, no matter how many hours I put into it. And I want it to look good, and I want it to be sturdy, and I want to be proud of the finished product, but the techniques I use may be different than if this was a table that somebody was paying me to refinish for them. First thing is to remove the staples in these blocks, and then just take a mallet and bang them apart, and there's really no glue left holding these joints together, so it just came right apart, and there it is. And then I'm just cleaning off the ends with a utility knife blade. You could also use sandpaper here, just getting off old glue and getting it ready for the new glue, which is going on here. And this is just Titebond, I think Titebond 2. And in it goes. And now it's time for the clamps. And I'm going to put 2 on this bottom part here. And there's the first one and the second one. And now I'm just getting the glue on the tops of the legs. This is the end that goes into the bottom of the top of the table. And there it goes. And just give it a few taps with the rubber mallet. Just drive it into the holes. And then I'll put a couple of clamps on. And watch the glue squeeze out. I let it dry overnight and then took the clamps off. And now it's nice and solid. And now it's time to strip the top, and I'm just using citrus strip. It works well for me. Just make sure you get plenty on. I don't recommend using a spatula like I'm doing here to apply it. I usually use a brush, but I just couldn't find it. And you let it sit maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, and then scrape it off. Sometimes you may need to apply it again, depending on how tough the finish is. And then I take mineral spirits and 4/0 steel wool and give it a scrub just to get all the stripper goop off the top. And here it is after it dried, and you can see that cross grain scratch on the end, which is going to be an issue. So next step was to sand it with the orbital sander, and I'm using 150 grit sandpaper. And then I'll follow that with 180 grit. And then next step is to bleach the top of the table with oxalic acid. And I'm doing this to try to remove that black water stain that's on it. And the oxalic acid gets mixed with water, and then you wipe it on, let it dry, and be very careful with the oxalic acid. You want to be careful not to get it on your skin or breathe in the powder. And here it is after the oxalic acid dried and it's been cleaned off and the water stain is gone. And now I'm sealing the top with some shellac. This is Seal Coat by Zinsser. And I'm sealing the top because I want to make sure that the stain does not soak into that scratch, that big scratch that's going across the grain. I want to try to control how much stain is absorbed, because if the stain gets in there, it's just going to make it that much more obvious. And because I wasn't able to sand out the scratch because it goes all the way through the veneer. So I'm using gel stain here, which normally doesn't need a sealer like shellac, but I just want to be extra careful that it doesn't get absorbed too much into that scratch. The next step is to seal the top, and I'm using Deft Satin Lacquer from Can. And you can put on as many coats as you want until you get the build that you're looking for on the top. And I'd probably put on at least 4 or 5 coats. And after that dried, I went over the top with a piece of brown paper bag, and this just helps to take out any little bumps, if dust gets caught in the finish as it's drying, things like that. Smooths it out a bit. It's just a very, very mild abrasive. And here's the finished product. Thanks for watching.